Miter box saw, we have a lot of these in here. Once we get working where we're using these, I don't want to see people waiting in line to use this saw only. There's a lot of them. We got 3 brand new ones upstairs that we'll bring down. Well, I do have some tables we can set them up on. They're not as quite nice as this stand. But for most stuff we do in here, you don't necessarily just have to use this one. This is a nice saw. It's the nicest one by far that we have. And the reason for that, it can cut angles this way like any miter box saw. It can also tilt back there both directions, so it's dual bevel, and it's a sliding compound saw. So it does a lot of different things. But the only reason you really need this saw when you couldn't use the others if you were cutting something wide, so where you needed that sliding action. So don't everybody stand in line for this one once we get going on this. But for now, I want to watch everybody use it and make sure you're using it safe. They all work basically the same. They lock down. That's the way I like them at the end of the class period, is lock back down and unplug, never left plugged in. A lot of people, traffic come in and out of this building. There could be some real young students in here, come in here doing something there. They walk out here, they grab the saw and start it and didn't know what they were doing and cut their fingers off. Okay, so I don't like to leave stuff plugged in. None of this equipment around the edge stays plugged in. But basically to get them to open up, you start by pushing down, releasing the pressure, and they'll have either a tab you got to move, or this one has a little pull thing here. You just pull that out and it lets it come up, okay? Don't let this come slamming up because it's hard on the mechanics of it. This is probably a $800 saw, you know, and if you mess something up where it don't stay where it's supposed to be, then, you know, you've messed it up. All of them do have also, I got to plug it in to try this, they have a laser. That laser to me is just like that gauge over there. I don't like to use them. I don't know what these guys did to me here. You got it all wound up. You don't have to wind that cord up like that. You can just drape it over it. You do have to run the shop vac. It does have that where it sucks it most of the sawdust, so don't get every bit of it. I'm just going to plug this in for a second to show you the laser. Shines down on your piece of wood. I don't like to use them because if I mark that right there, right where that red line is, that's right on the red line, and I'm going to cut this just a little bit. If you're doing trim work, you can see it's way off, okay? If you were that far off in trim work, you wouldn't be a trim carpenter anymore, okay? That has to be precise, okay? That's way too far off. That's almost 1/8 of an inch, okay? That's why I don't like to use them. The best way to do it is get your board up there where you're wanting to mark it, and just keep bringing your blade down to your wood till you get it where you want it, and then come back up and make your cut. Okay. Did you see how slow I cut with that? That's how slow everybody better be cutting with it, and I can tell when you don't, because it's going to make a big bang, more than likely. It's going to catch your piece of wood, and it's going to bang, and there's going to be a splinter shot off across the room, okay? Got to make sure you're cutting slow with it. I don't care if it's 1x material, and especially 2x material. Don't get rammy. I don't want anybody up here trying to cut a little block like this of any sort, okay? Even if it's, you cut it and it's a little bit long, I would rather you get a different piece of wood. What happens is when you're trying to cut something small like this, it ends up catching and it'll roll, and it feels like that kicking back. It feels like it broke your fingers, but not only that, it could suck your fingers right into that saw, okay? So around 6 inches or so, I don't want anybody cutting anything smaller than that. Cutting with this, you got 2 choices when you're done making your cut. You can cut and then leave the saw at full speed and bring it up. Or if you let off that trigger, you got to leave the saw down all the way till it comes to a complete stop. If you don't, and why it does it, I'm not really sure, but if you let off that trigger and you start bringing this up, it catches that board and it makes it, it'll split your wood and send a sliver out. So you're either doing this and leaving it full tilt and bringing it up, or you're cutting, letting off and letting it come to a stop and then bringing it up. One of the two is the only way I want to see it done, because it will catch. Here, to set your angles out front, you pull this handle up, you pivot it around, there's an arrow here, you set it on the angle you want, then you lock it down, okay? That's mainly what we'll use here. Set it back to 0. The other thing you can do with this saw, it has a lock back here, and you can pivot this around this way or this way and cut angles. So you could have, like you were cutting with a skill saw the other day, it can be on a dual angle. But see these? You'd be cutting right into it, okay? Are you guys paying attention up there? Good. You'd cut right into that, which would be bad. $60, $70 blade plus cutting in the saw, plus you're going to be shooting sparks. These have little knobs here. You can loosen these up and slide these when you do that. The only time, you don't have to worry about it when you're going this way and this is square. It's only when you're using this dual bevel back here. So I got to get this set back to 0. Just like that gauge over there though, if this saw somebody binds something up in it, which I'm sure will happen, it happens every single year, sometimes they'll throw this thing out of kilter and these are no longer the right angle. Two things that you have to check here. You have to check blade up and down to make sure it's square with the table. And you use a square like this, you could use your speed square, but that should run right flush with the blade. There shouldn't be a gap anywhere, okay? You can check that way. The other part that you got to check is make sure that this angle is correct at a 0, which is square with this fence back here. And the way you do that is with a square. Now, just checking it here is probably not good enough. You need to check it all the way out. The way this thing telescopes out, it has a little knob here. It's right here. Little black knob. You just loosen it up a little bit, and that lets you pull it out like this. So you can check that by putting it against the blade here and then rolling it back in, and it should stay right tight to that square, which it is. So it is good, and these are true angles now. But periodically, or if you notice something isn't fitting and you can see it's a little bit out of square, we need to adjust that, which requires screwdriver loosening this up and moving that needle a little bit to get 0 on 0. Then everything else is right after that. Adjustments to this saw, as far as changing this angle here, as long as you're not grabbing the handle here, I don't expect you to unplug this saw to change this angle. You're way out here. As long as you're not holding on to that handle, you're fine. This also has, when you're cutting something long, which you are going to be cutting off this long stuff, these telescope out to help you hold your material. You got to make sure your material's laying flat across here. So if I grab a board here, cut that. Of course, this is way shorter, so I can move that in. These are adjustable, but you got to make sure you're pushing down and back in when you cut. You don't want this hold down. You want to hold it against that fence too, so it's kind of a two-way pressure you're putting on this. If it's really long sticking out there, you probably could grab somebody to help you. Help you with holding it out there, because once you cut that, that piece is going to want to flop down. So you could have somebody tail off there. With this sliding, if you do not need it, I want this thing pushed back and locked down. Okay, so because for this wide board, you don't need it to telescope out. The only time is when you're cutting something wider that this saw blade won't cut through is the only time you use that. What happens is if you leave it loose, you won't realize, and you'll be out a little bit like that, and you'll cut down your board, and then it don't cut the last little bit, then it ends up catching and sending that splinter, okay, because you're not ready for it. So just make sure when you're cutting stuff you don't need it to telescope out, you tighten it down. If this blade will not cut all the way through something, I don't want you using this saw. That means use a skill saw. If we're cutting a 2-foot wide piece of plywood, you're not using this saw. You're not cutting it all the way this way, then flipping it over and trying to cut it from the other side. We're going to use a skill saw. That's what you should do. So it has to be able to cut all the way through, which I think it cuts about 12 inches wide, and that's it. When you do use the telescope, you always start your cut out here and push it in. That way you're pushing your material back to your fence, okay? If you cut in here and pull it out towards you, you're pulling your material away from your fence and it's gonna kick on you. No cuts made without having a hand on your material you're working. You have to hold down and back, okay? No free handing like this and then cut, you know. If you got your material on this side, I know you're left right-handed. Some people have a little bit of hard time using their other hand. With this saw, you have to. You cannot, if I'm on this side and I like to use this hand for the saw, you can't do this. See how my arms are crossed? Never, okay? Don't ever do that. You have to hold with this hand and cut here. Or flip the board on the other side, which isn't gonna always work for you, and cut it with the other side, okay? So you can use the hand you want on the saw, but not always are you gonna be able to do that. Trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to cover. Keeping the equipment clean. We do have a blow nozzle. I don't want to hear that thing blasting and stirring a bunch of dust up in here, okay? Just bump it, but it's nice to spray this motor out, any of our equipment, because that keeps it from heating up. If you don't keep that clean, the sawdust out of there, the fan can't suck air into there to keep the motor cool, and it's hard on your motor. So I do like to blow this stuff off, keep it fairly clean. It doesn't hurt to do that every day in here. Anybody have any questions on this saw? I'm going to have everybody go through a trial thing with it, but only when you get through them safety tests. Oh, I don't want anybody doing this on it either. Cutting a piece and trying to rip some little piece like this. If there's not much wood in here catching, that'll kick, and I guarantee it's going to probably suck your finger in there, okay? Whatever you do, you got to make sure it stays back tight. Of course, it can't there with that. But I mean, this is way too small to be trying to do this and rip a little bit off that. That's what a table saw is designed to do, okay? It's a lot safer. So don't be trying to do that kind of stuff on it. I guess that's pretty much all I have with this. I do want to go over something else, but we don't need to record it, so you can go ahead and shut that